Today's tutorial, guys, you'll be learning how to draft out Armhole princess that bustier pattern. I'll be needing shoulder measurement of 15 inches, bust of 40, under bust of 37, waist of 40, front length of 17, back length of 15 inches. I'll also be needing all my vertical measurements, which are shoulder to the bust point, shoulder to the waistline, shoulder to the under bust points. Now, guys, from the top of my paper, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. And this is going to be my shoulder point. From this shoulder point, I'm going to mark all my vertical measurements. From the shoulder to the bust point is 10, shoulder to the under bust is 14, shoulder to the waistline 17 inches. Now after this, I'm going to draw my lines across. Now after this, I'm going to go ahead and label all my points. I have the shoulder line, I have the bust point, I have the under bust point, I have the waistline. Now I'm going to move over to the shoulder, divide my shoulder measurement into 2, mark it out. Now from here, I'm going to come down by 1 inch because our shoulder spine is not straight. Now after this, I'm going to ensure that I have my shoulder divided by 2, so you can see what I did right there. Now from the shoulder slope, I'm going to divide my bust circumference by 6, add 1.5 inches, and that is going to be my chest line. So you can see what I did right there. Now I'm going to connect the distance between the shoulder slope and the chest line, and that becomes the armhole depth. After that, I'm going to input my neck width and my neck depth. So I'm using the standard measurement of 3 by 3 inches. I'm going to go ahead and connect it together. And then after that, I'm going to connect the neck width into the shoulder slope, just like this. Now from here, next thing I'm going to do is label my chest line. After that, I'm going to go ahead and divide my bust circumference by 4 and mark it on the chest line and the bust points. Now after that, I'm going to move over to the under bust point, divide my under bust circumference by 4, mark it out. Move over to the waistline, divide my waist circumference by 4 and mark it out. Now after this, I'm going to connect all these points together. Next, I'm going to divide my armhole depth by 2 and then mark it out. Now I'm going to go in by 1/2 inch, and then I would connect my front armhole. After this, next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and mark out my nipple to nipple measurements. I'll be working with 7 inches. Now I'm going to divide it by 2, which is 3.5, and then add 1/2 inch for stitching allowance. So I'm going to mark in 4 inches on the bust points, on the under bust point, and then on the waistline, and then connect the points together. Now after this, from the bust point, I'm going to go down by 1/2 inch. And then after that, I'm going to move over to the under bust and the waistline, okay? And we are going to have to contour the under bust and the waistline. Now, by the side, I'm going to mark out 1.5 inches. And in the middle, I'm going to mark 0.75 inches. I'll move over to the waist, repeat the same thing. 1.5 inches by the side, 0.75 inches in the middle. And then I'll connect the points together. Now please note that this is not the same for all the measurements, okay? Now because I'm working with a medium size, that's why I made use of this measurement. Now after this, I'm going to connect it back with my curve to the 1/2 inch below the bust point, just like this. After this, next thing I'm going to do is measure what I have on the armhole. So I'm going to take it from the shoulder slope to the chest line, just like this. And what I have there was 9.25 inches. I'm going to equally divide it by 2. Whatever I have, I'm going to start from the shoulder slope again, measure it down to get the middle of my armhole. So now that I've gotten the middle of my armhole, I'm going to have to tighten my armhole to avoid any form of gaping. And to do that, I made use of 1 inch. So I took out half an inch from both sides and then connected it back to the bust point line, as you can see me doing like this. Now guys, after this, remember this dart intake of 1 inch. I'm going to have to replace it back on the dart leg of the side fronts. Now you're going to watch clearly what I'm going to be doing. So you can see I'm going to raise it up by 1 inch and then blend it up like this. Now after that, I'll come over to the chest line again and then replace the 1 inch. So I added 1 inch right here, and then I'm going to connect my new armhole. Now after this, I'll move over to the under bust and replace my dart intake, which is 2.25 inches. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the waistline, 2.25 inches, and then I'll connect the points together. So now after this, remember the front length and the back length is 2 inches different. So on the bust point, I'm going to come down by these 2 inches, and this is going to be my bust dart. Okay, you can see I connected it to the bust point. Now I'm going to equally divide it into 2 and then go out by half an inch. Now after that, I'm going to connect it back to the chest line and then back to the under bust line. Okay, now what this does is, if I'm to cut this out, I might run short of fabric by the time I want to close up my bust dart. But by the time you do this, it will help fill up any form of shortage you might experience around that side. Okay, so I went ahead to label my center front and my side front, and we are done with drafting out this front pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. So guys, you can see, please take a look at how I'm cutting this out. So I have my center front already, and I'm going to cut out my side front. So guys, as you can see, I'm done cutting out my side front. Now I'm going to close up my bust darts just like this. Okay, this is the time you're going to notice what happens here. Remember that I came out by half an inch because I told you if you don't do this, you might run short of fabric. So I went ahead to close it up. So guys, you can see now I'm going to go ahead and cut off the excess. Can you see? So this is why I did that on that place. Okay, now I'm going to use my tape to hold it in place and then remove my pins. Now I have my front block. This is my center front and my side front. So guys, we are going to move over to the back. The difference between the back and the front block is just the zipper allowance. So I have all my lines. I have the shoulder line, I have my shoulder to the bust points, I have my shoulder to the waistline. Now the waistline is 15 inches, okay, because the front length and the back length is not the same. Reason I made use of bust darts of 2 inches. So guys, after this, whatever it is I'm going to draft is going to start after the zipper allowance. So I'm going to input my shoulder divided by 2, come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slope, and then divide my bust circumference by 6, add 1.5 inches for my chest line. Okay, and then after that, I'm going to connect my shoulder slope into this chest line, and that becomes my armhole depth. Now for the back neck width and the neck depth, I'm going to use 3 by 1 inch. Okay, so for this tutorial I'm making use of standard. Remember that this neckline can easily change, depends on the type of neckline that your client wants. Now after this, I'm going to connect the neck width into the shoulder slope, and then I'm going to move over to the chest line, divide my bust circumference by 4, mark it out, repeat the same thing on the bust point. I'm going to move over to the waistline, divide my waist circumference by 4, and then mark it out. Now after this, I'm going to connect the points together, and then from here I'll move over to the armhole depth. Now on the armhole depth, I'm going to divide it into 2 and mark out the middle. Now I'll move over to the bust point, divide my nipple to nipple measurements by 2, and then mark it out. So you already know it's 4 inches. I marked it out on the bust point and the waistline and connected it together. Now I'm going to tighten the waistline. Okay, so I'm going to be using that intake of 1 inch. So I went ahead to share it equally on both sides. So by the side I marked out 1/2 inch, and in the middle I marked out 1/2 inch, and then connected it to the bust point line. Now after this, for the back, I don't think I've ever done this in this channel before. For the back, I'm going to be making use of princess darts. Okay, I always make use of shoulder darts for the back, or make use of just waist darts, but for today I'm going to be showing you how to make use of armhole princess dart for the back. So as you can see, I went ahead to connect it to the middle of the armhole, and then also tighten the armhole by 1. Okay, so from the middle I marked out 1/2 inch from both sides, and then connected it back to the bust points, as you can see. So guys, after this I'm going to have to replace the 1 inch for the dart intake, just like we did for the fronts. So I've replaced it. I'm going to also replace it on the chest line, and on the waistline I'm going to replace the 1 inch dart intake. Now I'm going to connect it back like this, and then connect from the chest line down to the waistline. Okay, and equally connect my new armhole. So guys, as you can see, we are done. Now I'm going to have to modify the zipper allowance, because if you don't do this, your zipper might bulge, and you don't want any form of bulge around the zipper allowance. So what I'll be doing is, on the zipper allowance line, I'm going to go out by 1 inch and come in by 1 inch on the waistline. Okay, now after that I'm going to go ahead and connect it back to the neckline. Now if I'm connecting back to the neckline, you can see I didn't connect it to the exact neckline point. Okay, you can see, and after that I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. Now guys, another thing you should note is that we haven't added any form of sewing allowance to this pattern. Okay, now if I'm to cut on fabric, I'll be adding up my sewing allowance. I hope you guys understand. So here is the center back. I'm going to go ahead and cut my side back. So guys, I am done, and you can see I have my center back and the side back. I equally have my center front and the side front. This is how to draft out your armhole princess dart bustier pattern. You can see it is very simple. Please do well to share this tutorial, and also give it a thumbs up if it was helpful. I will see you guys in my next tutorial. Bye.